When they first started talking to me about working on this film, they had mentioned that they wanted to take the franchise in a different direction.
Coming off of the last Transformers movies, we really started to think about which character would make the most sense to go forward.
Where's B-127?
And Bumblebee, of course, first comes to mind.
Sorry I'm late, hit a little traffic.
Bumblebee is my favorite character, and it's because he is so youthful and fun and lighthearted, but a great warrior. And you don't lose sight of that, right? Because he definitely saves the day.
Bumblebee is something of an origin story. It shows how did he begin his journey and how did he become who we know him as.
I found a planet that's well hidden. Earth. You will travel there and establish a base for us.
Bumblebee is a key lieutenant to Optimus Prime. When he's sent off on that mission, he's hell-bent for leather. He's going to achieve what he set out to do. And of course, he runs into an incredible foe.
When Bumblebee first arrives on Earth at the beginning of the film, he trans-scans a Volkswagen Bug and carries that vehicle form throughout the film, where you see all of the interaction between Charlie, Hailee Steinfeld's character, and Bumblebee. And the whole middle of the film is about Bumblebee kind of finding himself.
Bumblebee has lost his memory of who he is, and so basically everything beforehand is not accessible to him. So in a sense, he's being remade in his relationship with our girl, Charlie.
Charlie has spent enough time with this car to realize that this is now her new form of freedom. And even though it needs a lot of work, this is her new project, and this is what she's about to immerse herself in. The discovery of Bumblebee as a robot and not just a car happens pretty early on in the story.
When B comes along, he's like new to the world. Everything is strange and different and exciting and terrifying.
And Bumblebee, much like a scared puppy, kind of takes the step forward and crouches down to my level and allows me to sort of prove that I won't do anything to hurt him. And in that moment is the moment of discovery where this is a friend. This could be somebody I could trust, and I'm not gonna tell anybody. And then from there, you see this budding friendship.
You sound like a little bumblebee. I'm gonna call you that from now on. Bumblebee.
One of the things that we explore in the film is how metaphorically and how, in reality, how Bumblebee finds his voice. And it is really important to Charlie to help B communicate what he's thinking, what he's feeling when he can't speak. It's one of the things that they're able to bond over.
Oh my God, yes! This dynamic between Charlie and Bumblebee is so incredible because you can see with just a look between the two of them how much love there is and how much he cares and how much she cares. He's a robot, but there's this like wide range of emotions that are happening. He's like a person.
The thing that's always been interesting about Bumblebee is that he's clearly the Transformer that has the most affinity for humanity. What is it about us that he finds interesting? What is it about him that forges such a deep connection with us?
Thank you
So much
for giving me my voice.
People are back to understanding the heart and the humor of Transformers. And all it's done is inspire us for the future films.
Let me tell you something. A driver don't pick the car. Car pick the driver.
Charlie was a girl that I wanted to see on screen because I hadn't seen her on screen when I was growing up. I was always watching movies and I loved all of the characters I was seeing, but more often than not, it was a boy going on an adventure. So I knew that I wanted to do a story about a girl in her car.
Do you speak?
We first put together a large list of actors. We kept thinking, you know, who's that one that's going to be magical? We had to live up to Shy, in a sense, who was so perfect.
Edge of 17. It was a film that came out at the time that I gave my pitch, and the lead in the film was Hailee Steinfeld. I remember thinking there was something about her performance in that film that was just so honest and pure and real. And I saw echoes of that in Bumblebee.
This is all my fault. I should have never left you.
And so in my very first pitch meeting with Paramount, I talked about Hailee Steinfeld.
You go.
Hailee was the first person we offered it to, and thankfully she said yes.
When I read this script, it's sort of funny to think of it this way, and it was a sort of a discovery I made early on, that Charlie transforms just as much as this robot does.
Stupid car!
From morning to night of every single day, there's some sort of transformation she makes as a person, as a young girl to a young woman. I think I can help.
The core relationship between her and this robot is central to the film, but there is no robot.
Where is he now?
He's still a car, but the door just opened.
But eyes. I immediately went back and watched the first movie and sort of paid very close attention to how the actors were acting opposite what was going on around them.
Action!
And I then realized that with this movie, I have more interaction with this robot than any other human. I'm good, thanks.
And so we had to figure out a way early on that, what would be the best way to evoke those kind of experiences? How could we be authentic? How could we naturally bring those feelings to the surface for her in a way that was real, as if she was acting with another person?
It's kind of been a matter of trying everything.
It's more like you're in that world.
And having Travis really direct and guide me based on what he sees on the other side has been incredibly helpful.
Run! No, don't run.
Can I skip?
I'll allow it. Hailee is phenomenal, and they're asking an awful lot of her in this.
Stuff's flying, things are on fire. It feels so real. It's good, it's great.
And those really strong emotions that you have to show, she's doing them to a pole with a tennis ball on it. So that's generally tough for anyone to begin with. And she's done such a great job.
I need all of you to fan out and track that thing down now! Drive!
John Cena plays a character named Agent Burns, and we felt like we needed a different government antagonist.
What the hell? Take it down!
So we thought he would give us a very different tenor. And also, he has such a sense of humor. There's a lightness to that big guy that I think felt tonally correct in our movie.
Can you imagine the advances in alliance with these creatures might bring?
I imagine the advances. An advance on Washington.
It's not gonna happen.
They literally call themselves Decepticons. I've always wanted to show a little bit of dimension and personality, and I've always wanted to play a kind of conflicted character. Which side of the fence does he lean towards? And this one came up, and I loved everything about it.
Hey, there's a civilian here. That is not how we operate. Get the kid out of here.
John Cena. What about John Cena? First of all, his hands are like the size of my head. That's like the first thing I picked up on.
It's undeniable. He's a big, big dude. He's got arms like oak trees.
Stay cool. Hold your fire.
Big, physically imposing presence, and that was part of what the character needed to convey as well.
There's a door in my way. Blow it up.
At first, wasn't sure if I was pumped on the fact that I kind of sort of wrestled John Cena. Stop it! Stop! All injuries aside, guys, I pretty much wrestled John Cena.
Enough!
But he's awesome. So much fun. What a great guy. A gentle giant, really. He just is so sweet and has the best sense of humor and really, truly cares about the art of what we're doing. He pays attention to every little detail and comes to work very prepared.
When he showed up for the first day on set, he didn't have his sides with him. And I was like, oh, John, do you need your script page? He's like, no. He's like, got it all in here. He had the entire thing committed to memory, and he's such a great collaborator. You'll start throwing different things, and he gives you lots of different variety, different choices.
Man, I can assure you that it isn't it. It's all part of a cutting-edge military defense program. Ma'am, friend, your daughter's had a very traumatic day. You approach it as a professional, but I become a little kid.
Is that okay?
Yeah, man, yeah. I had to fly in a helicopter, full gauges, full instruments. I can't help but like flick the switches and stuff. You get to do stuff that you don't do every day. And I think as long as you keep that perspective, you'll have fun all the time.
3, 2, 1.
That's not a bad day at the office.
It's definitely been one of the most exciting processes I've ever been a part of.
Go.
With all of the stunts and the driving and the robots. I feel incredibly honored to be a part of it because it really, truly feels like something special.
It's so fun.
You know, they say that 90% of your job is casting. That's true for the crew and obviously for the actors.
Take cover!
If you can find the right person who really connects with the character and can bring that character to life, a lot of your job is done. And I really did luck out. I grew up playing with the Transformers action figures and watching the animated series. And when the animated film came out in '86, I loved it.
When Transformers hit, I was right in the middle of it. I vividly remember transforming Optimus Prime. He was the best toy I got.
A lot of us were raised on the G1 Transformers, those toys, those cartoons. So to have a movie that's set at that time, there's a nice nostalgia to it.
There's something about iconic personalities of Generation 1 that really resonates in the Bumblebee film. And I think it comes down to heart. I think the heart of Generation 1 is really about the plight of the Autobots against the Decepticons, the straightforward mission to protect Earth, and their ability to connect with humans.
With the design on this film, we wanted to make sure that we did something that felt more evocative of the '80s Transformers designs. At the same time, these are robots that exist in the same universe as the other films, and so it couldn't be such a departure where it felt like it was a totally different movie.
If you see anyone besides me, what do? Great.
So Bumblebee has a look. We just brought that look into the '80s and did some reformulation.
We were using the original cartoon and some of the original artwork as our inspiration. Okay, here's our launching point for these characters, and everybody was super excited. The geeks came out. I could hear people in the halls go, "This is what I've been waiting for."
Jason came and showed me all those designs, and I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, we're doing that. I made that my sacred mission. Like from then on, I was like, I'm gonna make those guys awesome.
The movie opens with a battle on Cybertron between these two factions of these transforming robots.
The opening Cybertron scene was completely CG. The frames were really dense. There was smoke, embers, sparks everywhere, lots of robots shooting at each other, so there's muzzle flashes. And it was really challenging on the compositing front.
It was a sequence that we had to do in a very short period of time with lots of assets. And that includes a gigantic tower that comes crashing down, taking out other buildings and things like that.
We had this opportunity to not only explore this G1 look to that whole planet, but also to bring all these different robots that we all know and love back to that G1 aesthetic.
We spent a lot of time researching each robot and making sure they were true to their G1 color palettes. We did refer to some of the old school toys and the 80s cartoon.
If you look at the cartoon G1s, they're actually really simple. They're boxes mainly, like box legs, box everything. And that would not translate well into the real world. So we had to take the basic silhouette of the originals and then put details onto them, like Shockwave. If you look at his head really closely, you'll see that right next to his eye there's cutouts, and then there's all these little details in there that you would never see in the cartoon because, you know, it wouldn't be necessary. So we draw from the cartoons, but then we go one step above and make it so that it looks like it would exist in the real world.
Destroy the launch pad. Let none escape.
You know, all the Transformers films have jaw-dropping visual effects, but this film, this is character work. This is acting.
Tell me where your friends are hiding.
I'll never talk.
Is that right?
We needed to make sure that Bumblebee and all the Decepticons that he goes up against feel like real, living, breathing creatures. It's not just something that looks cool, it needs to have emotion behind it. And the way we do that is in storyboarding, where we try to figure out, you know, what this character is thinking, what it's feeling, and then very clearly lay it out in really strong and evocative boards.
And those storyboards were used to shoot the scenes on set. And then those same storyboards that were used to shoot the scenes on set were then given to the animation team here to make sure that that original intent of the scene was conveyed through our CG robots as well.
When I talked to some of the designers early on about the kind of emotional performance that I was hoping to get out of Bumblebee, I said, you need to simplify. As much as we can streamline what's happening in Bee's face, those things that then can move and be expressive are going to be that much more powerful.
For example, Bumblebee's eyes in this film are much larger and more expressive than they have been in previous films.
We had to come up with a look for the eyes that allowed the animators to still express through the pupils. The pupils change size when he's scared or angry. So we wanted to put something in there that was complex, but not so complex that you lose the emotion.
Do you speak?
And I think kind of opening that window to Bumblebee allows us to really, really see what he's thinking at every moment.
So basically the previous Bumblebee was more alien looking like. So what we did with this one is like we brought more earth element to it, something that you can relate on. So like lots of car parts, lots of like Beetle parts. Making sure like we can see the transmission on his chest. The tires are the right tires of this time. When you see Bee, you see the Beetle inside him basically. And there's like all the details that you need to make sure they look real on camera.
The only person you can show yourself around is me, okay?
The performance that the animators at ILM were able to get out of Bumblebee was extraordinary. He gives a beautiful emotional performance, and that's a tribute to all the artists at ILM.
The Optimus Prime redesign was a really fun opportunity. We were able to take the character that we've all gotten to know from the previous films and then really inject some of that G1 aesthetic into that character.
The 80s, the Optimus Prime was my favorite. And when they gave it to me, I was the happiest guy on this planet because I was the only one working on it, so I had to do it from scratch, which was awesome.
It's not that super detailed muscle action on his face. It's more of seeing his overall simplified mask and it move a little bit. And to me, that's a lot more reminiscent of the original cartoons.
So like the Michael Bay Transformers and the Michael Bay's movies, it was more like an American truck. It was a lot bigger, almost like a muscle truck. But the original truck is more like a European truck style with like the flat front.
As we look on the 80s in a happy, nostalgic way, you get to look on the franchise in the same way and be like super excited. So the end of the film, it really was so great to see Optimus the way I remembered him back in the day.
That was the whole fun task about it. Optimus completely changed in that movie. We're going back to the original design. Is the guy that you knew when you were a kid.
When I thought about the Decepticons for this film, again, going back to my experience as a kid playing with these toys, Autobots were always cars, Decepticons were always aircraft. And so the first Decepticon we see is this incredible fighter jet.
When I saw the art for Blitzwing, I almost lost my mind. It's just such a cool-looking character. He's got this intimidating silhouette with all these spikes coming out in all different directions with these wings and missiles, and he's a lot larger than Bumblebee, too.
Did you think you could hide?
This Decepticon is grabbing onto our little robot and dragging him up the side of a cliff and really, really beating him up.
When we were researching for the Decepticons, we realized that Shatter was a Harrier and Blitzwing was an F4. And then we scratched our heads to think, oh, how are we going to get reference for this? And then we did some research online and we found out 1 hour up north, there's an air museum that had both of these planes there. So we drove up there and we photographed the heck out of them. And that's how we got reference for these two planes.
So Shatter and Dropkick were the first two triple changers we've ever done in a live-action film. Just really exciting to take the robots to like just a different level and have that extra complexity and dynamic nature to them.
If you remember the triple changers, they were like very complex toys and you had like a 20 pages manual to transform them. So basically that was the same idea. Travis wanted that to like happen where like Dropkicks and Shatter turns into muscle car first when they arrive on Earth. And then Dropkick turns into a Cobra helicopter and Shatter turns into a Harrier jet. So that was the challenge on those guys, was that to make sure that the balance is right between the jets elements and the vehicles elements and the alien robots elements. So they're gonna get more complex, having like a G1 feel to it. So the balance was like a hard thing to get. But I think we managed to do it anyway, so they look great, and I'm really happy with the result.
It's a tribute to the production team that they were able to assemble this extraordinary group of people. All of them embraced what this film was going to be. They had affection and love for the Transformers, but they knew that this was a different kind of a film.
It was super exciting to be part of this, and if I could go back and speak to myself as a kid, I think she would have been very pleased to hear that I had a job painting Transformers robots, you know.
I was just so happy about going back to G1 and having to build some Transformer, which is one of the best tasks I ever did in my entire career, basically. It's like kind of a set you do once in a lifetime.
Nobody has ever had more fun at their job than we on this crew had bringing these G1 characters into this film.
The joy and the camaraderie in this crew, it really was extraordinary. People really did love this movie and they put their souls into it, and I think that comes across in the film. It's something about a VW Beetle. So many people have some kind of a connection with this particular vehicle. It's so many people's first car, and it just evokes warmth and memories and nostalgia. And even in the shape, I mean, it has these beautiful curves. It's not muscular, it's not aggressive. If you could give a car a hug, you'd want to give a VW Beetle a hug. And I think that gets to the core of who Bumblebee is.
Bumblebee's always been a character that has a lot of heart. He's a character that seems like he might have an interesting story to tell. And I think for a lot of us, he's our favorite in the franchise. When I would go to my friend's house and play with the Transformers toys, Bumblebee was my favorite character for sure.
I love Bumblebee. He's always been one of my favorite characters. He's just so relatable and fun and warm, and you just want him to be your buddy.
Look at you go. Hey, you got some moves.
Bumblebee was always my favorite Transformer. He's not the biggest or most powerful Transformer, but his vulnerability gives him character. And the yellow, it's very 80s, it's cool.
Bumblebee shows just like a crazy amount of charisma. He's always like funny without saying much since he doesn't really talk. I'm just happy that we're able to see this origin of him and we get to see more of what made him the Bumblebee that we know and love from the previous movies.
Is that why you're always messing with the dial? You're trying to teach yourself how to talk, aren't you? B, you're a genius.
The audience resonates with Bumblebee because he's an underdog. He's a warrior, an absolute warrior in a very small frame. But he always tries to make these personal connections with the people he's protecting.
Oh, me? Who am I?
I think it's so incredible that we basically get to go back in time with Bumblebee and see where he came from and see him in his original form.
Go, go, go!
Bumblebee as a character first appeared in the comic books of May 1984. It was the pilot issue. He appeared on Cybertron. He came to Earth, rescanned as a Volkswagen Beetle. But then later that year, 1984, in the fall, the animated series debuted. That just blew the doors open. You have Bumblebee and Wheeljack. They're stealing Energon on the planet Cybertron. So right out of the gate, you get Bumblebee. He's like one of the first characters as a Transformers fan you see.
And all of those memories that you have of seeing Transformers coming to life in animation have been really brought to life in a totally amazing way on the big screen.
To see Bumblebee as he was, as a VW Bug, was just so compelling. You know, we got a tease of that in one of the early movies, in the first movie, and yet now is our opportunity to really play it through.
Bumblebee has a distinctive look that's been honed on the previous Transformers films, but with the design on this film, we wanted to make sure that we did something that felt more evocative of the 80s Transformers design, something that was more plainer, something that had more plates, like all the little gears and gizmos that didn't look like, you know, if Charlie were to put her hand on Bee's chest, that her hand would get ground up in a gear.
What are you?
The VW Beetle itself, it has curves. It's kind of a warmer, gentler shape.
Great. Helpful shame spiral, B.
This particular model was kind of like the perfect example of the VW of the period. It was kind of the classic VW, and even the hardcore VW fans will agree, I think, that was the best representation of that model.
Well, they have 8 Volkswagens, and I was just thinking in my head, like, this is Bumblebee. And I just imagine it, like, just transforming.
Why do you need 8 cars? It's hard to get a car to do all the things we're asking it to do, and it complicates matter if you're asking it to do more than one thing, and so it starts multiplying on itself. And, you know, when you also think about it, is if a Bumblebee doesn't show up on that day that's working, we're dead. It's Hailee and Bumblebee, and if either one of them don't show up, we're in trouble.
We had like different Beetles, some that could drive, some were just shells, some had a driver on top of the roof. The weirdest thing was we have to drive it sometimes, or someone's driving on top, and we don't really got control of the car. We're trying to stop and the car's still going. It's really dangerous, it feels like in there.
It is a little top-heavy. It's a little weird to drive. This is the first Volkswagen I've ever seen with a pod on the roof of it, but it's definitely a little pirate ship when you're driving it, but we've put it through its paces. It's safe.
This is my first time driving stick, and I want to say it was easy, but when you have like a million other things to think about, including like not killing the people in front of you and hitting the mark and like saying your lines, it was very difficult. So I might say that my favorite one to drive was the electric one.
We knew that the talent was going to be a younger generation, and younger generations don't always know how to drive stick shift, so we came up with the idea of building an electric car, which is super simple to drive, and she caught on to it really quick. We also had some driving lessons with a normal stick shift car, and she actually does really well with that, so it's a good backup just in case, but she definitely prefers to drive this car, and it makes everyone's life a little easier. And then the rest of the cars are puppet cars. They rigged some of the cars for the shifter to move on its own, so you can actually stand behind the vehicle and move the shift lever like a robot would be doing it.
It's really been cool to be in these cars that feel like they are from and of their time.
Being able to take the time in a film where it's not filled with dozens and dozens of awesome robots, but it's just this one character that we're able to focus in on. We really get to understand who Bumblebee is and why people love him. I was a child of the 80s. I grew up loving those classic coming-of-age tales. Those films always evoked 3 key responses: wonder, laughter, and tears. They would take you to worlds and experiences that you'd never seen before, and they really would kindle that side of your imagination. To be able to tell that kind of a story, to be able to take this huge canvas that Michael and the team have built over the last decade, and to focus in on a tiny corner of that canvas and tell something that's more intimate, more character-driven, and more evocative of those great classic coming-of-age stories of the 80s, that was something that was really exciting to me.
I'm a kid of the 80s and I love the 80s. Transformers feels so rooted in the 80s.
Otis, look at me. I'll be right back, okay? If you die while I'm gone, I will kill you. Do you hear me?
The 80s has a very specific flavor, which is great for filmmaking purposes because there is a look that people recognize.
Travis does a great job in channeling the way we relate to characters from like our favorite like 80s period movies that we like know and love. It's very wholesome.
Come on, live a little, people.
We weren't really trying to find a town that looked 80s or 70s. We just wanted to find a town that felt timeless. Like, probably it wasn't a lot different today than it was in the 1980s.
We started looking at Marin County, and originally we were looking for an exterior location where we would just build a garage onto an existing house, and then we just could not find a house that would accommodate that. And we found an empty lot in Marin County and the kind of neighborhood that seemed appropriate for the characters and for Charlie. And we ended up building a complete exterior with a complete garage.
Yeah, I can't right now. Sorry.
No.
All of our sets on these movies are giant construction projects. The art design, the props, you know, the detail was extraordinary, and I think Part of that is to convey the time period, but it's not like we're zooming in on any of those particular things. It's all part of selling the 80s without being overt.
It's really fun when you're bringing this world to life that doesn't exist anymore. And I think with world building, so much of it comes down to the details. You take your wash over everything, and this is generally what it looks like, but when you really get down to make the world feel authentic and lived in, you got to get down to the detail. All right, it's nice when you guys have these little moments of laughter. So every single tiny thing, they have to be thought about. And, you know, how does this prop, how does this set, how does this relate to the characters and what they're going through? And you make choices. And, you know, a lot of us, we just went back to our own childhoods. We went back to our own experiences in that era and brought so much of ourselves to it.
That was one of the most elaborate sets. I mean, you literally could have lived in that house.
So as we come into the garage, her dad's old, you know, sort of den of sorts, where his record collection, TV, VHS, this would be where it was happening. As well as the car, the Corvette, that they both bought together in hopes of putting together for her 16th birthday.
For me, there are a couple of sets that are special to me. The two biggest ones are Charlie's bedroom and Memo's bedroom that feel like they are versions of my own bedroom from that era. And there were a couple of props specifically, and I'm not going to tell you what they are because it's too embarrassing. It was kind of like a little nerd wonderland going back and thinking about our childhoods and how we could give specificity to these characters so they felt real. And part of that is just bringing yourself to it. And I think a lot of the crew members, including Guillaume, our property master, who did an exceptional job, and Sean, our production designer, going back and thinking about where you were, who you were in that era, and trying to bring those elements into the film, it gives it a realness.
Travis and I had many conversations about the scope of the film and the particular period. Now, he and I are about the same age, and so we were teenagers in the 80s. And his background in animation make for a very detail-oriented director who really enjoys the nitty-gritty, all the props, all the little things. When you're in animation and stop motion, which was what he did, you have control over absolutely everything. So here he had to trust me with that control, and I had to translate to him exactly what we were going to do. So he is a great director for this sort of film because of his attention to detail. It's a period film. You have to have a lot of research put into it. The process of prepping this film with him was phenomenal.
Welcome to Sector 7. You're welcome to use all of our technology here.
We had a pretty amazing triumvirate in Tina and Kelvin and Dana in terms of like bringing to life the look of the 80s in this film.
We sort of decided really early on that it's an 80s movie, so it had to look a certain way, but it didn't have to be shoulder pads and craziness, you know, it had to be true and rooted in the period, but we were telling a story, and that was the important thing. Before our first meeting, we pull pictures and do images, and there were certain things that he really liked. He loved the Joan Jett of it all. He loved the Deborah Harry of it all. He loved like the rock influence that we were thinking about doing for Hailee. You know, she has to stand out. She has to have her own look, fit into the period, but in some ways she isn't fitting in with everybody else. There's something different about her. So we gave her like a little rock edge and a darker palette because everything else is poppy and fun and bright, and she's not. She has dark jeans, and she's got some greens, and she has, you know, a lot of black, where nobody else is really wearing any of that in this movie.
You like my shirt? Are you a metal fan?
I talked to my mom, actually, a lot about 80s fashion and trends, so to speak, hair and makeup. She was with me in a lot of my fittings at the beginning, and it was like a trip down memory lane for her. Charlie dresses sort of toned down a little, I wouldn't necessarily say cooler, but she just doesn't go the whole 9 yards.
Our approach to the 80s was to treat it sympathetically and to treat it sincerely, and there's absolute love in it. You can see it in the production design, in the costumes, in the hair and makeup. You can hear it in the soundtrack and the music that we're using. It was a real place, it was a real time, and we wanted to make sure it did not feel like we were lampooning it, that it was a cartoon. And so we treated it seriously.
Nice outfit. Let me guess. Cry for help?
One of the things that was really cool for me was doing location scouting on this film because, you know, working in animation, you don't do that. I've shot all my films at Leica in a big warehouse. And so you don't find a location, you design and you build a location. But of course, you can't get poison oak and you can't get stung by bees, which we did when we went on location. But that was one of the cool things working with J.J. Hook, who helped us find all the locations in the film, was that we wanted to try to use the sets and the locations as ways that we could reflect what the characters are going through emotionally.
Henry Cowell State Park, which hasn't been shot for years, was such a fantastic, magical location. It doesn't have quite as many big trees as the Muir Woods, but it's definitely comparable as far as I'm concerned, and hardly anybody really knows it's there.
We are in the redwood forest right now, and it's absolutely unbelievable. This is the first thing I've seen all day. And it's a tree that's over 2,000 years old, and it grows 6 feet every year, I think they said, which is insane. It's gorgeous, it smells amazing out here, and it's beautiful. Go nature.
I remember when we found that redwood forest. I'd never been to a redwood forest before, and when I saw those trees, it really took my breath away. You know, you see a lot of stuff, but when you can see these incredible 3,000-year-old trees, it's really something to behold. It made my jaw drop, and once we found that location, it was just stunning.
A big part of this movie will be the authenticity of California, so we wanted to get that right, and we didn't want it to be a distraction either.
And action.
You're 7 minutes late.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning, okay? Pretty sure there's not a whole lot of people looking for a wiener at this hour.
Trying to find the perfect location for Charlie and her high school job, and a way that we could evoke, you know, the life and the fun that everyone else around her is having, that she is stuck in this little prism. I thought, look, let's have this location be at a boardwalk.
We're here in Santa Cruz at the boardwalk, which the art department did an amazing job to transform us back into 1987. But if you came here on our initial tech scouts, you almost don't have to do too much because it's that romantic. It is that era.
So when we first got to Santa Cruz Boardwalk, Sean Hallworth, the production designer, scouted out this location, which was originally a hot dog on a stick way, way back in the day. So we had 2 graphic designers working on this project, Ellen Lample and Emily Roth. And they painstakingly recreated all of the original graphics from Hot Dog on a Stick. And all the original pricing, and our set decorator, Ann Colgan, came in, and we had these lemonade stands made, props came in with the food, and we are now an official 1980s hot dog on a stick.
Can't we just sell the hot dogs without the sticks?
No. The churro cart is a original from scratch thing specific to our story that our researcher, Lizzie Klein, had found some great reference of historical carts on this actual boardwalk, and we based the design off that. The graphics itself, we tried to mirror what you see as our Brighton Falls boardwalk signs and color palette. The churros were then brought in, they're real, and they were brought in by the prop department the morning of the shoot.
My favorite thing about Santa Cruz was they had such a wide variety of looks that you really got to span the whole of the 80s. We had punk kids, we had surfer kids.
That's when we got to actually show some of those bigger 80s looks because there was a lot of background, and so we got to play a little bit more.
My first day on set was in Santa Cruz at the boardwalk, and I was blown away. It was beyond anything I'd imagined. They transformed the entire boardwalk. It was like stepping back in time, and seeing the extras dressed for that boardwalk day was hilarious. Who doesn't love a mullet?
I drive a bright orange Datsun 240Z, and it's a hot little number, I must say.
Transformers are sort of synonymous with car culture, so it felt like it was very important for us to try to capture this moment in time. It's not just, you know, cars that were from 1987, it's, you know, cars that go back beyond that.
Usually, you know, when you're doing a modern-day picture, the sort of mechanics are simple because so many of those cars are around. But when you're doing a period thing like this, you've got those cars in the 80s and the 70s and even further back. A lot of those cars don't exist, so it's tough to find them, for one. And then the people who own them, you know, we threw some older shirts and some mustaches on them, and now they're driving in 1987. So it's a little bit more difficult because those car owners aren't necessarily experienced. They haven't done these movies every weekend like we usually do back in LA with modern cars. But you come up here to Northern California, you find the cars, you find the people, they get excited, Everybody gets a radio in their car, and you throw together an intersection, and then the whole thing comes to life.
Morning, Mrs. Calloway. Beautiful weather, isn't it?
And you should just suck up, Otis.
This particular location is the scene of a big classic 80s bonfire party. And so whether they're driving new cars or maybe cars that are, secondhand or third-hand or their parents' cars, we wanted to capture that, probably that, 10, 15-year period between, 1970, 1972, and 1987. And so you find a lot of the classic cars, the kind of cars that kids drove when I was in high school. And, you got the great Mustangs, you got Woodies, you got Pintos, you got, all kinds of cool stuff. It really does feel like I stepped into a time warp when I walked on this set. The Shaggin' Wagon. Yeah, everyone is drawn to that for some strange reason. That was the vehicle that we were told to stay away from when I was a kid. But now, as an adult, I am drawn right to it. I don't know what that says about me. But something about orange shag carpet on the walls of a van, it was pretty awesome.
I feel jealous that I didn't get to grow up in a time where I could run around in one of these muscle cars that they have on set. Everything's just so boring nowadays. Cars used to have character.
Are you telling me you could have been a Camaro this whole time?
3, 2, 1, go!
So we have this big, third act action sequence, and we wanted to find a location that could do it justice. And because she lives in a coastal town, it felt natural to have it at a marina or a dock. And we found this place that was just cool. It was this old naval yard that they built, ships in World War II in Mare Island. And the architecture, the bones of this place was just stunning. It just looked so cool. And what's more, the dry dock where they would repair and assemble these ships, when it's drained of water, it looks like a gladiator pit.
The second we saw it, we thought, what a fantastic place for a bunch of robots to be knocking the crap out of each other.
We actually end up designing some of the action sequences around the shipyard. For instance, the dock was another of those things. When we realized we could flood it, we end up making that a major part of the third act. But it was all a discovery as we got there.
These cranes that are around us add a lot of texture. There's a lot of history here that adds a lot of texture. Having all that to put our CG characters into just roots everything in reality so much more.
We call it the Bay Buster, an homage to Michael Bay. and the reality of this is the Bay Buster's acting like one of the robots is being tackled, so we have debris, and it just gives us bigger impact and bigger dynamic action.
I don't even know where to begin. I am running for this tower to save B. At this point, Charlie's doing anything and everything she can to save him and keep him safe and keep him alive, as well as keeping herself alive. It feels so real. Stuff's flying, things are on fire. It's good, it's great.
It's amazing. Maybe the coolest thing I've ever done.
Yo, the explosions.
Came here for the
they were like, the PA was like, it's not that big of an explosion. And then you go in and you're like, yeah.
So the Golden Gate Bridge was the perfect ending for the movie. It felt like a romantic place to say goodbye. It had the kind of beauty and scale that created a perfect bookend for Charlie and Bumblebee.
You know, the great things about all the Transformers world is we go to pretty spectacular places, and obviously we've got the wonderful Golden Gate Bridge behind us in San Francisco, just off over here, and We're thankful that all the people that support us to get up here, because this is not an easy place to allow shooting, and so I think the local community went out of their way to help us.
Oh my God, yeah, the Golden Gate Bridge overlook was like, here we are, here's our location. This is awesome, that the backdrop is not only the Golden Gate Bridge, but like, we could touch it from where we are. It was so incredible.
We shot the end of the movie at Battery Spencer with 150 of our closest tourist friends.
As you can see out here, there's not much space, and there's tons of tourists, and the park's not going to let us shut it down for all the tourists and all the visitors. So that we squeezed in a little 85-person film crew and about 17 trucks into this one little slice of pie here.
A place like this, even, you know, we imagined it originally as kind of a beautiful, kind of romantic moment in incredible golden sunlight reflecting off of the water. Well, you know, we got some bluster. We got some gale force wind. I think maybe a hurricane is coming in off the coast. But the thing about this particular location is even when the weather does not cooperate, it's still incredibly beautiful. I think that really does evoke what we're going for in this scene.
Yeah, that was great. Picture is up. Picture, let's go.
Shooting in California in general has been an absolute dream. I am born and raised in LA. So to be able to spend time in these places that are so close to home was really incredible. I questioned why I had never been to all these places before, but I'm so lucky that this film has brought me there.
Around the world, people think of California as a special place and has a connotation in their heads. It's something they aspire to, something they want to see, and we wanted to be able to show people that kind of classic California thing, and I think we got it here.
It was an extraordinary experience. I've done a lot of stuff in my career over the 20 years I worked in animation and film, but this last year working on Bumblebee, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life.